Welcome to Puddlecast, where we discuss safety, water, environment, and career development topics. Let's jump in.
Welcome everybody to today's Puddlecast, coming to you from the Puyallup River. Some people call it the Puke. This is a glacier-fed river in Washington State, and it is opening day salmon fishing on the Puke. I just saw one roll, so I'm a little bit concentrating on what's going on there, but I thought I'd do a Puddlecast from the river today since I had a little bit of time and I wanted to get down here. I sort of wanted to talk to you from the water here about, obviously this is not a very clean river. This is glacier fed, so you see the turbidity level that's in it. The fish are really not residing in here. They're passing through as they go to headwaters, and so we're trying to catch them as they get through this stuff into the cleaner streams that they're going up to spawn in. But I wanted to talk to you about some of the rules that I have that I've sort of generated over the 20 plus years that I've been in the stormwater industry, and talk to you about what, if you're going to be in stormwater and you're going to manage a stormwater property, or you're going to be a stormwater manager, some of the things that you might need to consider in terms of that management and general rules of being successful in this industry. Sorry, I was swinging at what I thought I felt a fish on the end of my line there. And there are 5 rules, and I'll work them backwards. And the first one is that absence of information is assumption of guilt, and that there is so much paperwork, and there are so many things that you have to manage on a stormwater permit, that if you are not diligent at that, if you are not good at managing paperwork and following through on inspection forms and stuff, you can put yourself at tremendous risk for exposure, because that paperwork is really the proof that you are following through with your permit. And if you don't have those pieces of paper, there are exposures to you that it can be a cracked door that a citizen group wants to walk through, or someone wants to get you in trouble with. And oftentimes that reporting is something that we have to submit to a public platform. It could be an online type of platform where we're communicating all of our permit compliance things to, and people in their pajamas that don't know anything about your property can look and see if you are in compliance with your permit or not. And so if you didn't write it down, if it's not in a log, if it's not on your site inspection report, the assumption is that you're not doing it and you're not following through. And if you're not following through, that exposes you. And in a court of law, those are violations of the Clean Water Act, which represent over $50,000 a piece, that you're going to have an attorney argue. So in stormwater management, no matter if you're working on a municipal permit or a construction permit or an industrial permit, paperwork is such a huge component of what you have to do to be in compliance and be effective at not having to spend a whole lot of money. So if that's not you, get somebody on your team that is really good at managing a system and can help you with that process. So absence of information is assumption of guilt, and that is rule number 5. Rule number 4 is an ounce of prevention is worth a ton of cure. And the saying is it's worth a pound of cure, but in the stormwater world it's actually bigger than that, because the costs of having to mitigate something that you could have controlled at the source oftentimes represents 5, 6, even 7 figures in potential treatment on a property. Not only that, but all the management costs and construction costs and things like that you could encounter as a result of that. So you really want to look at your sources, and that means what you're bringing on the site, what materials you're bringing on, but also what you're working in, or what conditions you're working in. If you got a certain soil type, or you do a certain industrial practice, and what kind of pollutants you're bringing on the property. But it even goes beyond that, especially when we start having to sample water. Some of the samples that we're taking are for metals, and those metals could be solid metals or they could be dissolved metals. But a lot of the times those pollutants are generated from the composite of materials that we have put together in our history for stormwater management and moving stuff through pipes. And your stormwater structures, the glue that's joint glue that's gluing the pipes together can be an issue for you for PCBs. So knowing the composition of your materials, knowing your storm system, knowing what materials you're bringing on the site so that you've got things in containment or undercover as much as possible, where you're not having to take it out at the end, that is oftentimes the most effective approach in stormwater management. It takes effort and it takes energy. I'm not going to tell you that those things don't cost you something. They cost you a lot of, it requires a lot of patience of you. It costs you a lot in communication to your team and the rest of the folks that you're working with. You may have to work with different people that don't know that stormwater is one word, and if you're the only person that does, that's going to be a tough education program for you at your property or facility or with your team. So those are things that you have to really consider in your management, is trying to prevent those sources so that you're not having to take them out at the end. And for some projects that's easier than others, and you really need to spend a lot of time focusing on it, especially when you're not in an emergency circumstance. So, okay, so the fifth rule was absence of information is assumption of guilt. The fourth rule is an ounce of prevention is worth a ton of cure. The third rule is don't rely on hope as a BMP. And a lot of people in our industry do that. We'll just take an example of a construction project. It's Friday afternoon and everybody's getting ready to go to the high school football game because your kids are playing in the state championship, and decisions start to be compromised at Beer 30 on Friday, and we start to say, we're not going to do what we need to do here at the end of this week and just hope it doesn't rain over the weekend. Well, when you show up on a Monday morning after a rainstorm, that hope wasn't really a great effective BMP for you. There are a lot of people that do a lot of hoping with best management practices, and because they've read some marketing literature that says this BMP takes 80% of this type of pollutant out of the water, they essentially do that math to their benchmarks or to their pollutant parameters and say, I should be able to reduce my discharge compliance standards by this much because the marketing material says it'll do it at this rate. Well, the challenge with that is that percentage reduction was done under a certain circumstance, in a certain condition, under a certain type of maybe a water pH, or didn't have all the loading to it that you have in your stormwater. So you can't just hope that these BMPs are going to do what you need them to do. You use that as a data point, a point at which you make an evaluation. But even manuals and even guidance documents that states and other folks generate, they do their best, but they aren't the end all be all. They aren't the thing that is going to absolutely 100% without a doubt work on your piece of property. And a lot of folks just react and they say, well, just tell me what's going to work, or just go get this thing. And that only works some of the time. And if that's your sort of philosophy of management, you may be successful sometimes, but just like gambling, the house always wins. And if you're a gambler and you gamble with hope, and I hope what I'm doing works, without science behind it or doing any kind of source analysis or understanding that way, that becomes an issue for you. Or, it doesn't even have to be BMPs or water quality standards. It's, I hope regulators don't come visit me. I'm way back here in the woods, or I'm at the end of this road, and we don't see anybody. Well, it's all good, and you saved a lot of money and you did a lot of stuff until that inspector does show up on that piece of property and looks through your books, and you haven't done anything for years. Then that opens a Pandora's box. And unfortunately, a lot in our industry, people have to learn through pain. They can be told a lot of things, but it's awful, the painful lessons that are the best teachers, and that's an unfortunate way to live. That's an unfortunate thing that we have to go through. It's understandable. Stormwater management is a huge cost in a lot of businesses, and I've actually seen it put a couple companies out of business, which is unfortunate, but it is part of doing business, and it's part of something that you're going to have to consider as part of your management decisions and part of your cost estimation. So don't rely on hope as a BMP. Rule number 2, we're getting closer to rule number 1. Rule number 2 is that this is a pun that is intended, it is a fluid situation. Stormwater is a fluid situation, and you are going to, like I said before, somebody else that has used a BMP that was really effective for them on that project may or may not work the same on your project. And that is because you have different water or different climatology or different soil or different pollutants of concern or even different practices that don't allow that BMP to behave on your piece of property like it did for somebody else. And so that situation is kind of a fluid one in making decisions. You're going to have to make those right decisions. But more importantly, things that cause fluidity in your decision making are, number one, permits change every 5 years. So you get in the practice, or you start to understand your permit about the 3rd year of your permit cycle, and 2 years later that permit is going to change, and new rules could come into play that either enhance what you're already doing or completely shift what you're doing. And in a lot of cases, you have reacted in this permit with a certain type of BMP or a certain type of process. And your hope, again, hope not being a great BMP, but your hope is that BMP is going to be robust enough to get you into the next permit cycle. Like if we have a case right now in Washington State where the industrial stormwater general permit is changing this year, and we have a bunch of clients that are putting treatment systems in to try to manage for copper and zinc. Well, the challenge is that this permit cycle is now starting to talk about PFAS and 6-PBDQ, and the hope is that without a lot of testing and without a lot of studies and without manufacturers spending millions of dollars to go through the protocols that they have to be to go through different state protocols like TAPE in Washington State or other ones around the country, that your hope is that investment that you made to get you in compliance with today's permit also has the ability to keep you in compliance with this next permit cycle. And sorry, that was a fish there. So that fluid situation, the fluidity of it, and frankly, here's the other part of it that's fluid, and this is really the unfortunate part, and a place where our regulatory community needs to step up, is that when you are inspected, I always talk to people about building a rapport and building a relationship with your inspector. And that has resonated and had been true, especially early in my career, where you could get through a lot of difficult issues and a lot of challenging conversations by having a conversation with an individual without them having to write something on a piece of paper. And it was because they knew who you were, and they knew what your philosophy was, and they knew that you knew what you were talking about, and you could get through that. The challenge is that our regulatory groups keep changing. In a lot of places, they're difficult places to work. They don't oftentimes pay super well, and the folks that you're talking to continue to change hands. So you have to build new relationships with new people with different levels of understanding or education based on, or experience more importantly, with the permits that they're enforcing. And you oftentimes do a lot of education of the regulatory community. And an additional layer to that is not just the regulators, but there aren't a lot of regulators, especially for certain states. Washington has, a handful of folks, both east of the mountains and west of the mountains. Oregon has a small handful of people for the entire state, and they're supposed to go see all kinds of projects from construction to industrial to mining, and so they are very much taxed in terms of their time, and they have a huge understanding that they have to know all these permits, and they have to know what they say so that they can regulate them appropriately. And so what that's done, because of the demand that's out there to go do inspections, and the budgets and the ability for regulators to hire people to do this, is that they've started to rely on local agents, local municipalities, local enforcement folks to help support their programs. The EPA's done it to the state's done it to cities and counties, and they're saying, well, look, we don't have enough people to go out and do what we're mandated to do, so we're going to essentially ask you to be sort of an agent or the eyes or ears of inspections for us in your jurisdiction, and that has now added an additional layer. So I've been on with some clients where they've been inspected by the EPA, by the state, and by the county, and the inspection reports are contradictory of each other. One person wants you to take all the cattails out of the pond because the city manual says that ponds should not have any of those great big, nuisance plants in them. And so their expectation for what that pond looks like from a maintenance standpoint is like a golf course pond. It needs to be, grass on the edges and none of the cattails in there and all that kind of stuff. But where you talk to the state person, the state's going, no, you know what I want you to do is I want you to make sure that it's not impeding the flow, but I want you to leave some of those cattails in there because they are great pollutant removers of zinc and metals, and those should be in there. But there's no reference guide or reference manual for either one of those two to be consistent with their approach to that property. So you've got a permittee who's a bit confused about what it is that they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to manage, and then they got potentially a consultant like me who's telling them crazy things like, you can put biochar socks in there and you can do those things, and that's not part of the design element of the feature of the pond, and then they're having to get permitting and having to get dang it, that was another bite. Having to get permission from regulatory people to put that in there. So it is a fluid situation. It requires you as the program manager for a stormwater program to keep up with where things are going. I've been in this industry for a long time, and there have been a couple of what I'm going to call inflection or large change points over my career. And this time that we are in right now is one of the largest points of change for stormwater management that I see going forward in the next 4 to 5 years. We're starting to do things like chase chemistries in water at parts per trillion, which is putting a tremendous pressure on the laboratory industry to reinvest in the equipments that they're going to have to purchase to monitor for this stuff. And the ROI on those pieces of equipment is not high because as stormwater folks, we're only sending them a handful of samples a year. It's not like we're a wastewater treatment plant or a processed water food, something where we're sending them, multiple samples a day. We're just not going to be this cash cow for those folks that are investing in them. We are starting to now, as we were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, talking about moving the water back into the dirt and making the hydrology operate like it did before post-development came in and we started adding impervious surfaces. We are now being asked to make some determinations about what we're putting into the ground and going back and resampling. Well, okay, if I'm going to go now to look at my stormwater that goes into my infiltration gallery, and you're asking me to sample the water that's going through the infiltration gallery, I'm probably going to have to put pipes in there or some type of subgrade infrastructure to collect the water to a point that I can grab a sample. And if I start putting pipes into that infrastructure, I now can be converting that from an infiltration feature to an underground injection control, which then requires me to do more permitting and put more things in place. And so anyway, there's just these big things that I feel like have been building up for years, and now they're all coming. Oh, did you see that? I had one. He shook me. Dang it. These things that have been sort of, nobody's wanted to talk about them, and we'll deal with it when we have to. Well, they're all coming to a head. And so stay on top of what's changing. You're going to have to help your companies, help your businesses, help your jurisdictions anticipate what's coming in the future, so that proper planning can be made and budgets can be put in place that make sense. So so important as a stormwater manager that you are staying on top of the fluid situation and keeping that. Just a second. Nope, that's a rock. No, it's not. Is that a fish? No. So you're gonna have to stay on top of it as we go forward. Sorry, I got a snag. All right, the last and most important bullet, the final bullet of our conversation here is stormwater just has to become part of your business. It's not something that can be this afterthought, deal with it when we have to type of thing. Unfortunately, we are in a place now where we have to make it part of our business. We have to make it something that we're going to budget for, plan for, educate our staff on. There are new requirements and permits, not new, but in a lot of places they're relatively new, where stormwater has to be part of the orientation process. Just like, you know, where do you want your paycheck to go? And you know, these are our cultural values, and here's our mission statement and our vision statement, and here's our safety stuff. Stormwater's having to become part of that education program. And if you don't think about stormwater, I'm being asked more and more by insurance companies to go out and evaluate properties and do risk assessments, and that is something that is changing the value system of stormwater across the board. You're having to put real thought, real energy, real effort, and real money at this. And you do not want to be reactive in this industry. You want to have proactive and adaptive management. Adaptive management's a term that's used a lot in these permits. You want to anticipate what could happen to you before it does, because being reactionary in this market is oftentimes way more expensive. Those are just a few thoughts about some of the rules that I have for stormwater management and how you might be able to incorporate some of those rules into your program and implement them. If you have any questions or you want to talk to me more about that, please get a hold of us at cwtacademy.com. Happy to talk to you more about those things. The stupid fish jumped right there, about 20 feet from me. I am going to stop talking to you right now, and I'm going to get serious about trying to hook one of these kings that are in here. And but again, anytime, reach out to us. Thanks for being a part of this Puddlecast, and coming to you from the Puyallup muddy glacier river that has kings in it going to their home waters. I'm going to try to catch one. Thanks for showing up today. See ya.
Thank you to today's special guest. Join us again on the next Puddlecast.